Is that what's really meant by the chosen people? I mean, not necessarily that you were God's favorite child, but that you were chosen to really be an example and to be made an example of? Is that essentially what's meant by the chosen people?
Absolutely. The children of Israel was chosen to be that example. For instance, we have in our society today, we have people called lawyers. These people are responsible for administrating the law of the land and making sure that when a person is in the justice system, that the law is applied properly to that person and they go to court and that whole thing. That's pretty much what the children of Israel was chosen for, to administer the laws of the Most High, not to be chosen to stand on high and say, I'm this great people, the Most High loves me, He doesn't love you. That was not their reason for calling. That was not their reason for being chosen, but to be chosen to be an example to the world of how to properly keep the laws of the Most High. Now, see, one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is that when Moses stood upon Mount Sinai, and we read in the book of Exodus, and he gave the law to the children of Israel, this was not the first time that the laws of the Most High had entered among man. In fact, the laws, which are called Torah in Hebrew, which means instructions, His laws are the instructions for mankind on how we are to live upon the earth, how we are to live as a people, how we are to interact with one another. So the laws came in when man was created, and we can go into the Bible and we can see that. For instance, in Genesis chapter 7, verse 2, we read that Noah was told to take the animals upon the ark according to the law of clean and unclean animals. He was taking, I think it was 7 clean animals and 2 of every kind of unclean animals. Now, the law of clean and unclean animals we can read in Leviticus chapter 11, and this just states the animals that we can eat, animals that we cannot eat. That law did not begin with Moses, as we see. It's already in the earth with man, with Noah, way back in Genesis.
Sure.
What we see with Moses is the first and only man to give the laws directly to a nation. Because when man was all, once upon a time we was all one, we was all one language, we was all one kind, and we dwelt together. And this was before the flood came. But after the flood, we were separated into nations. And so the children of Israel are the only nation to receive the laws directly from the Father. Because once we came over on the other side of the flood, mankind, and once we went into our new nations, we continue to still corrupt the Father's law. We continue to give praise and honor to false deities. And so he had to pick a new nation, a new people to reinstitute his laws among man. And that's what the children of Israel was chosen for, to be that example of, hey, this is how you do this correctly.
Yeah, I appreciate that reframe, because I think that whole idea of the chosen people is something that we can sometimes get hung up on, and causes sometimes more trouble than it was meant to cause.
Absolutely.
So I definitely appreciate it being reframed like that. Let's take a quick station break. We'll listen to a piece of music, and we'll be right back on Pathways to the Sacred with our guest, Obadiyah Israel. You're listening to WPVM LP Asheville 103.5, the progressive voice of the mountains. My name is Josh Jordan, and this is Pathways to the Sacred. Our guest this week is Brother Obadiyah Israel, founder of Israelite Heritage in Chicago. Why are you so specific about the names of Christ and of God? Your website goes into a great deal of detail that Jesus is not, in fact, the man's name, and that it's a very important point. Why is that an important point?
Well, the scriptures tell us that his name is very important, as is every name in society. See, the reason we have names is to identify us, is to separate us. If I saw you walking down the street and I just said, hey man, and there's a group of men around you, you wouldn't turn around, you wouldn't pay any attention to me. But if I call you, hey Josh Jordan, I call you by your name, and then you're going to turn around and then you're going to, understand that I'm speaking to you. The same is, if you go to work and you receive your paycheck and they put the wrong name on your check,
sure,
you can't cash your check.
Right.
So names are important. So when we look at the biblical Messiah, because the prophecy was stated that many false messiahs would come, and these false messiahs would deceive many people. So when we look at the biblical Messiah and we look at his name, Yahushua, and his name means Yah, salvation, or salvation of Yah, and Yah is the Creator's name, as it tells us in Psalm 68:4. So his name encompasses his entire mission, his entire duty. He is the salvation that is given to mankind. That's why it's so important for us to accept that blood sacrifice that he made. So his name alone identifies who he is, what he came to do, and it is the respect, as Scripture tells us in Acts 4:12, that there's no other name given among men whereby we must be saved. So his name is all too important, just like the Creator's name is all too important, because if I'm going to give you the proper respect and I would not call you out of your name, why would you call the Creator out of his name? And you have to understand also that there are a multitude of deities being worshipped on the planet today, just as it was in the ancient days.
Yeah.
The Egyptians, I think, had like 360 gods. The Babylonians had about those many gods. So each god had a name, and whenever you wanted the service of that god, you prayed to him in that name. So when we see the Most High, and he states to us that his name is Yah and there is no other, we have to understand that he is signifying, telling us that, hey, this is it. This is who you call on. This is, you don't call on Amun-Ra. You don't call on Isis. You don't call on any of those deities. You call me by my name. Now, when we look at the titles, Lord and God, which Lord is actually, it means Baal. If you look at the definition of Lord, it means Baal, and Baal was one of the Canaanite deities. God, we can say anybody has a God. That's why you see now there are some Muslims that are going into Christian churches, particularly Louis Farrakhan, and he can go and stand in a Christian church and say, God is great. Okay, so, and then the people would stand up and they would clap, but the truth is the Muslims are supposed to worship a separate God from the Christians, but if you just call them God, then that encompasses anybody. We don't know who God you're talking about. There's thousands of gods. Anything that you worship is a God. So that name is so generic. Well, just like on the money it says, in God we trust, well, it should be changed to whose God you trust, because everybody has a God. Every religion has a God. So you got to identify who you are speaking to by name, and that's why it's most important to know the proper name of the Creator.
Now, we may be getting into somewhat controversial territory here, but your website also is very specific that you are descendants of the ancient Hebrews or the ancient Israelites, but are not Jews. Could you explain the distinction between the Israelites and the Jews? Because I think a lot of popular biblical thought is that they're one and the same.
Right. Well, okay, first let's look at the title Jew, the name Jew. It was a nickname, more of a corrupt nickname, a misnomer given to just the tribe of Judah. Any person identified from the tribe of Judah, as many of these scholars say, are supposed to be a Jew. So therefore Moses, who was from the tribe of Levi, and his brother Aaron, both of them were from the tribe of Levi, they could not be Jews. They were not Jews because they were not from Judah. So when we look at that name, and that name came about in the 18th century, around the 1700s, around a very interesting time when something called the Willie Lynch letter came out, where a slave owner wrote to other slave owners and said that they must wipe our minds clear of any historical information. And he said a lot of other things, how to make us a better slave. But that name Jew came around that time. So when we look into the scripture and we see the title Jew, the proper term is Yehuda or Judite. If you want to say in English, it's Judite or Judah. And in Hebrew, it would be Yehuda or Yehudite. So the title Jew did not refer to all 12 tribes of Israel. So right now the tribes have been dispersed throughout the world. We don't know the tribal destination. I don't know if I'm from the tribe of Levi or from the tribe of Judah or from the tribe of Gad. I don't know that information. So how can I say that I am a Jew if I don't have that information, knowing what tribal destination that I'm from? Now, when we look into scripture, the Hebrews were referred to by outsiders as Hebrew because that name means to wander or to cross over. But our nationality is Israelites, meaning we are descendants of the man Israel. So that's who we are, Hebrew Israelite, and it distinguishes us from any other people that is also claiming Israelite heritage. And that's another thing that we have to understand, is that there are a lot of groups out there. There's a group called the Christian Identity Movement. There's others that claim Israelite heritage, but we have such a strong stake and just a strong stance, and we're saying that we're different from any of these other groups. We're even different from the European Jews. So we have the title Hebrew Israelite.
So is it also a mistake to say that Yeshua was king of the Jews?
Okay, well, let me back up just 1 second. After the death of King Solomon was the son of King David. The kingdom of Israel was split into two halves. There were 12 tribes of Israel, and after the death of Solomon, the Most High himself split the kingdom into two. He sent 10 tribes north, 2 tribes south. The 2 tribes in the southern region of Israel was called Judah because it was named after the largest tribe, but it contained 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin. So any Israelite that lived down in that area and was of the tribe of Benjamin or the tribe of Judah, and even some Levites dwelled down there, then they also took on the title of Judah, but it was primarily given to the tribe of Judah. So when they say that the Messiah is the king of the Jews, because during his time when he came, the 10 tribes that was to the north had been taken captive by the Assyrians in 722 BCE, before the Common Era. And so when he came on the scene, when he was birthed into the world, there were only 2 tribes of Israel that was in the land, that had a little dominion, very little dominion, but they were there in the land at that time. And that was the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. So if they say that he was the king of Judah or the king of Yehuda, then they're just saying because he's from the region. And plus also he was from the tribe of Judah. He was directly from the tribe of Judah. So it would be proper to say that he is the king of Israel. And that's another thing. See, we limit him. He did not come to limit. He came back to reunite Israel, all 12 tribes. So by saying that he is the king of Yehuda, you're just limiting him to that tribe and to that region, southern Judah. But he came for the entire nation of Israel, all 12 tribes. So he's the king of Israel. That's the more proper phrase.
Wow.